Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming out and coming to this early 9:15 session. The topic today is driving strategy and inclusivity with human-centered design. And I'm Tracy Hinson. I head up business development for PromitSource, which is a digital agency based in Chicago. But I office out of, we have a distributed model, so I'm based in Austin. And so that's a little bit about me. And, in addition to your, typical websites and mobile apps, an area of expertise for us is accessibility. So we do accessibility audits and remediation work and training and et cetera. And I've already spoken with some of you guys already to get a kind of feel for the room and what people do. We've got a couple of front-end people. We've got a creative director. Any back-end devs?
I'm full stack.
Okay. And what about anybody that works on accessibility? You?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
From working with our dev team on accessibility as far as especially color contrast and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, very good. What about you, sir?
I own an agency.
Okay.
I'm sure there's
In
people
Dallas,
that
right?
do it.
Huh?
I'm sure I have people that do accessibility.
Right. I know people that that do that for us. All right, very good. So high level today, we're going to be going. We've got a lot of stuff to go over in this hour, but here's just a quick overview: accessibility and inclusion, and we'll talk a little bit about tools for accessibility and usability issues to be aware of, human-centered design. You might hear it called in some areas design thinking. I know at UT they really use the word design thinking, but it's it's roughly all the same. And then of course planning for inclusivity and usability. Just like the guy with the shirt that says Alley on it, you might see the word accessibility in this kind of a shortcut. But basically, accessibility is, in particular, digital accessibility is the ability of a website, mobile app, or electronic document to be easily navigated and understood by a wide range of users. Pretty simple. And you might see it written this way or pronounced alley because it's just there's 11 letters in the word and it's just a shortcut. So there are 5 main types of disabilities according to the W3C. Visual, which is I believe the largest and I think probably the most well-known category. Auditory, cognitive, learning, and neurological, physical, and speech. I've got this filter. I'm wondering if I can show you guys this, if I can find my mouse. I might have to come back to it. But I've got this filter that kind of shows you a variety of visual impairments, but I can't seem to find my mouse. Anyway, all right, we'll move on. I'll come back to it in just a bit. Previous understandings of accessibility really didn't encompass all those different categories. So it is something, it's a topic that is evolving certainly over the years. And in fact, cognitive learning and neurological category is actually one of these, is an emerging class of disabilities. And that can include things like ADD, dyslexia, dementia, even like traumatic brain injuries that can be sometimes permanent, but also sometimes temporary, Pizza. What does pizza have to do with accessibility? If I told you this was a Domino's pizza, would that ring any bells? Yeah. So recently involving the pizza giant Domino's versus Guillermo Robles made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Big, big case. So why all the hubbub with a pizza company? Well, the Supreme Court's decision, and this was just recently this month, it was on October 7th that it made it up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided not to hear the case and kicked it back to the Ninth Circuit. And that decision to not hear the case is less about pizza and really more about the core right of people with disabilities to use the ADA to support digital inclusion. Supreme Court, they could have said that the Ninth Circuit Court was wrong. They could have said that ADA was useless in the digital age. They could have given organizations a green technology for some users, but they didn't. So this case is much more than just pizza, right? It really is about students having needing accessibility to graduate, or people with disabilities or impairments of some sort to be able to confidentially review medical records or privately access their mutual funds. Or even like the ability to participate in our democracy, and having the accessibility, or if they don't have the access to use electronic voting machines. So this has some really big implications. And yeah, of course, it's also about disabled customers who want to order a pizza online like everybody else. So this segues into kind of the current landscape. Into my screen.
Did that earlier.
Okay, sorry about that. As you can see, the lawsuits in this on this is really, really spiked. From 2017 to 2018, just exploded. And, we're not through with 2019, but data is showing that 2019, this year, is on track to beat 2018's figures. So, this is really, really serious business, and it's important, except the whole accessibility, usability topic. I like this quote a lot. When UX doesn't consider all users, shouldn't it be known as some user experience, or SUX for short? Designing for all users is important, and for those of us in this room and here today, and all of us that are attending this camp, it's our responsibility to help people with disabilities access the internet. And how do they access the internet? Well, here's a few things. Screen readers and Braille keyboards and refreshable Braille displays. I was thinking last night. I remember not too long ago I was watching some kind of music awards show, and Stevie Wonder was on stage, and he was one of the presenters of that particular category and giving the award, and he was using a refreshable Braille display, and I just thought that was really cool that he brought, that was brought on stage. Anyway, I'm a big Stevie Wonder fan, in addition to Prince as well. So these are just, a few of the assistive devices that people keep going off like that. I don't know. There we go. I don't know. I guess it's keeping you.
Visual problems watching.
Yeah.
It's not very accessible.
Let me show you guys this example. I hope if I can get my mouse over there. I keep having trouble with the mouse issue too.
I find it sometimes helpful to put the mouse in like a corner.
Yeah.
Pull it out.
Or you can just shake it, and Mac
Hold
OS
on.
will give you a larger version of the cursor key.
Can somebody help me with, I don't know. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
Okay, very good. So let me just kind of set this up just real quick. This is an example, not a poor example of how some people, experience the internet when content is not designed or developed for all users. And you'll quickly get the idea here.
Link. Fall 2019 link. October's story link. October link. Season link. /link. Link. Image. Call out _link. Out link. Yo link. Lock link. Mount link. Short link.
Painful, right?
Unlabeled image. Link. Unlabeled link. Unlabeled link.
I can't even hear the whole thing.
Unlabeled link.
The clip is only about 2 minutes, but that's enough.
Yeah.
Now that was sped up to kind of illustrate. No one's really going through it that quickly, but you get the idea. That's horrible. For someone to try and consume the content that way, just horrible. So what kinds of things make your site accessible? Well, there's a number of them. There's lots and lots and lots of ways. We could talk for hours about all the different ways to make a site accessible. We feel like, if you had to narrow it down to the top 10, these would be really important ones to conquer. When you look at the WCAG guidelines, it just goes on and on and on and on. I mean, there's copious notes, so certainly there's way more than these 10, but you get the idea. Label form fields, skip links, certainly consistent layout and structure. And adding alternative text to images, pretty much everybody knows that. But that's not all. And we're actually going to touch on that just a little bit. That there's a little bit more to it than that. There's a little bit more nuanced. There are a number of accessibility tools out there that you can use. I know in our office at Promet Source we use a variety of them. Lighthouse, Wave, contrast checkers. There's a lot of these tools out there, and some are better than the others. Some do one thing a little bit better than the other. But you just kind of have to try different ones, and kind of figure out which ones you like to use the best. Here's a screenshot of a Pally dashboard. I will say this: there's a lot of benefits to using these tools, and like these accessibility auto scans. But bear in mind that you cannot solely rely on just those tools, and that's why a manual audit with a human applying the knowledge of the WCAG guidelines to what they're seeing on these sites is so important. 30% of the accessibility errors. So a human really needs to look at the site and audit it and uncover the rest of the 70%.
What was the Mac app on the bottom of your 2 slides back? One more slide? Mac app. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is, I mentioned to some of you guys earlier that this is an area of expertise for our agency, and so one of the things that we do is offer audit and remediation services. This is kind of a good visual graphic of the process. You have to first audit to kind of to see what kind of accessibilities are out there, kind of identify the various issues, and then make a plan to resolve them, remediate them, and then validate that you indeed resolve those issues, and then make a plan to make sure that the site stays in compliance once you get it, because of course websites shouldn't stay static or stale. So they're always going to have new content being uploaded to them, and you want to make sure that it stays within compliance after you do this work to get it into compliance. All right, we'll segue into usability issues. The accessibility fallacy. Yes, there are technical criteria for supposedly making a website accessible. But really, if you take this kind of myopic approach, like a checklist or a scorecard, and just go down the list, it will only get you so far, and because you really have to apply this layer of usability to it, and that's where the sweet spot is. Where you've got accessibility built in, and you apply usability best practices, and that will really help your users. Hopefully this alt text should appear. I don't know, I think we got some internet instability or something. It's not showing it. All right, oh, there it is. Okay, that's some alt text right there. Jacobs Park signage, just a little slow. So when alt text appears, what do you think you're about to see? If you were someone with a visual impairment and you came across that with a screen reader and you saw Jacobs Park sign, would that be a really great description of what what we're all seeing? Not really. So there is some nuance to, yeah, they check the box of adding alt text, but there's a much better way, a much more descriptive way to describe that image. It's, you check the box, but it could be better, right? So just because there is alt text doesn't mean it does a sufficient job. All right, this is a little exercise for the group. What if I asked you to do any number of these items online? Buy a CD, figure out a bus schedule online, or look at some mutual fund information and compare and contrast different funds and their performances, or just finding out some maybe temperature information for a city that you're about to travel to. Now, imagine doing those things, those tasks, with your eyes closed and using assistive technology. Well, that's exactly what the Nielsen-Norman Group. Has anybody heard of the Nielsen-Norman Group? Okay. So they conducted this big study, a major usability study, about 19-something websites in the U.S. and Japan, 84-something users is what I recall. And this is what they found. Look at the time it takes someone who's using a screen reader or a screen magnifier to, complete a task. Almost double. And even, I thought this was interesting too, even for the control group who has no disabilities, it's not 100%.
Right.
So, issues.
So I got a question on the time. Is that time for completion, or is that time for even the people who failed, they just gave up after 16 minutes, 15 minutes?
That's often what happens. They just give up. They just give up.
We just had a huge lawsuit at Schwab related to accessibility, but we didn't get hit. We just got the ability to start moving forward. But that was one of our biggest complaints, that folks that wanted to do something that would have led to a conversion, they just quit midway through.
Yeah, and you know what they do? A lot of times, especially with regard to like e-commerce transactions, they get to a point, they try a number of ways, and then they just give up, and then what do? They call. Mm-hmm. So it costs companies money, because then they got to move resources to a call center for someone to handle those calls so that the person can complete the task. But usability and accessibility aren't always BFFs. They don't always play well with one another. And here are a couple of real world examples to show you. The top example is, these are actually from our agency. That like I said, when I said real world examples, these are examples from our agency, where a third-party usability consultant said, you gotta take out that in-panel scroll bar. That's a major usability error. Take that out. And the bottom one, with using from a third-party accessibility consultant, said, "Oh, you gotta keep the in-panel scroll bar in there to make it compliant." So, you know, I'm not going to characterize this wonderful, peaceful existence of usability and accessibility. Sometimes there are challenges, you know, but you know, this can also often put accessibility and design at odds and competing for good usability. But the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. And I really like this quote because when you sit with it and if it resonates with you, and it does resonate with me, I feel like, you know, we never welcome limitations until we see what's possible. We never welcome limitations until we see what's possible when we overcome them. And in a business environment like we're all in dealing with clients, we'll often hear like an attitude that to view accessibility guidelines as competing with or complicating, or, you know, it's adding to the cost or what have you. But, you know, creating great web experiences that must adhere to strict requirements can actually spark incredibly creative solutions. So, you know, limitations actually help us in the end. And that's really that sweet spot, you know, where the sweet spot lies is, like, you know, when good usability and accessibility come together. That's the best of both worlds for the user. So we're going to talk a little bit about human-centered design. What is it? Why use it? What are the benefits?
Can I just ask a quick question
Yeah.
about the previous slide? The slide where you had the two examples competing against each other, what would be a solution for that? How would you solve for that?
About that particular, oh gosh, you know, I'd have to ask our team what they ended up doing. Yeah, I don't know. But that would be interesting to find out, like, what did they end up doing, you know, in that instance. I don't know off the top of my head, though. So human-centered design is the discipline of generating solutions to problems and opportunities through the act of making something new, where the activity is driven by the needs, desires, and context for the people for whom we design. Not for us, for the people for whom we design. And there are a lot of benefits to this practice and this philosophy. And here are just a few. It reduces risk and cost, and what company doesn't, or organization doesn't like to reduce costs, right? Taming complexity and promoting collaboration across teams. And, you know, often inclusiveness and diversity doesn't just happen. It's by magic. You have to plan for it. And that's where human-centered design really comes into play, because it's a process and there's a sequence of activities. One activity relying on the prior for information, and all the while influencing the design work and decisions made on the associated project as a whole. Persona sketches are one of those activities, and Persona sketches are great because they work really well on slim budgets and timelines, and they help to serve to represent the site's users and create a characterization of their attributes, goals and needs, motivations. What are they needing from the site, and what do they expect? You just kind of list a whole bunch of assumptions for each of these personas, right? And what we've learned from our clients is that they think they already know their audience and all those assumptions. But we suggest adding a new persona to each primary and secondary target audience to account for a person with a disability or impairment of some sort. So that's included in the site analysis and development. And on the far right there, you see that persona of Steve, who internal staff. He's got a visual impairment. Just kind of like flesh that out a little bit. High level. But including that in those persona sketches, again, early on, really helps to ensure that as you're moving through the process, you're thinking with accessibility from the get-go, right? So we've learned that we have to make a lot of assumptions to gather all this information. The persona really needs to be validated to be truly effective. So what do? We interview them. And interviews really help to validate all those assumptions that we just made early on. So we ask questions about the site and how they're accessing the information, what they want, what they need, even asking about like typical online behaviors to find out the sites that they enjoy using. And once we complete the interviews, we revise all those persona sketches to flesh them out with all this substantiated detail now that we've done our interviews and we validated some of those assumptions or invalidated them, right? Because sometimes you often find that your assumptions weren't right. But this all challenges our thinking and provides new information to work from as we design requirements and functionality and page layouts, etc. Yeah.
Dumb question coming. Are the personas developed before the interviews or
Yeah.
after? Okay.
Yes. So we do the persona sketches, we do the interviews, and then we go back and we like I mentioned, we take the validated information and then kind of revise the sketches.
More refined.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as you guys may already know, what a user says, thinks, feels, or does often contradicts. So that's why we have to talk to our users. We advocate on behalf of users calling for a deep understanding of them and their prioritization of needs. Empathy maps like the one that you're seeing, which was developed by the Nielsen-Norman Group, can serve as a fundamental tool for accomplishing both of those things. But humans are complicated creatures, right? And so, you'll often see that what we say or think or do contradicts with the other. So usability testing is really important, and that's another key sequence of this. It can be done online or in person and tested on prototypes or live sites. And you really get to see how users, use the site and how they behave. So you hear their emotional responses. With regard to conducting usability studies for accessibility, here are a few tips on that. You'll want to conduct the on-site usability studies, if at all possible. It's best. And let the users use the assistive technology that they're familiar with. Be transparent. Let them know that you're recording them and why. Don't move anything in their home or desk without asking. And read the tasks aloud for the users. And of course, encourage them to express their thinking either verbally or in writing, if it's easier for them, whatever. Just try to accommodate the user. And what you'll get from this activity is that you, very early on, you identify the usability issues and you learn what the users really need. And early stakeholder buy-in is another key benefit. And this also, solving for edge cases. Sometimes that'll pop up. So, high level, to make your site accessible, you're going to want to create usable designs and start with accessible modules, this is another benefit of Drupal, and build with empathy and test again. Lather, rinse, repeat, right? We found Drupal to be one of the best CMSs in terms of accessibility. All the core features comply with WCAG 2.1, and it's built to encourage support, built to encourage and support the proper use of semantic markup, key to accessibility for users who rely on a screen reader or other assistive technology. And although there are more features than the ones that we've listed, we feel like these are some of the top accessible features that are built right into Drupal 8 at their core. So let me show you this. That example that I showed you guys earlier that was really horrible. This is, if I can get my mouse back up there, I'll show you a better example. I always have trouble with this mouse thing. Oh, okay, here we go. Where is it? Come on. There we go. This is a site that we did for Martin County, Florida.
Section list with 5 items. Facebook, link list item. Twitter, link list item. YouTube, link list item. Instagram, link list item. Flickr, link list item. Section list with 9 items. Home, business link list item. List item, residence link. List item, business link. List item, departments link. List item, things to do link. I want to link list item. I want to Martin County, Florida. Skip to main content, internal link. Skip to main content, internal link.
So, that's an example of how usability comes together with accessibility and how the website enables better usability using assistive technology. And that one actually won an award. So that, I think one of the main concerns a lot of clients have when you talk about accessibility in the design process is they think, oh, I'm going to have this crappy looking site, when it's all said and done. But it doesn't have to be. In fact, we did a couple of sites that were accessible and that both won design awards recently. So, you can have the best of both worlds. Just another few screenshots of this site. One of the things that became clear to us on this particular project was, the importance of people in Florida accessing important information about hurricanes, and they go to a website to try and figure out, what is the status, what do I do, should we evacuate, all that kind of stuff. And they should, to say people with impairments or disabilities should be able to access that information just like the rest of us. These little badges down here, I think, are the ones that, ADA compliant, and it won a Digital Distinction Communicator Award. So, key takeaways, hopefully, from this this time that we've spent together are, when viewed within the broader context of usability and human-centered design, accessibility is an opportunity to enhance engagement. And as you saw, human-centered design results in lower risk, cost, and a better website or product. And we are big fans of Drupal for some of the accessibility features that come right out of the box. And we talked about a couple of those case studies, like the Martin County, Florida one, where you don't have to choose one or the other, usable or accessible. It can be both, and you can have an award-winning design come out of it. So that's it for today. Here's my information if you want to connect with me, and I'd be happy to share this this presentation with you guys. If you want it, I can email it to you.